Okay, thank you very much. Some of our panelists have come from Delhi, and Delhi, as you know, is at the moment going through a cold wave. Flights have been delayed and so on and so forth. So I'm glad that all of them could be here. Um, I'm going to start with a very elementary question. India at the moment has 30 unicorns. Very quickly, in 3 points each, how do we take it up to 100? Anjali, let's begin with you.
So we were pondering a little bit. You know, unicorn is this mythical creature that no one's actually ever seen. And anyone who has read Harry Potter will know that they are magical, mystical, holy, sacred, and very, very rare. So I think the fundamental premise of a unicorn is that it is rare, it is special. I think the question in my mind really is not to take 30 to 100, but build tremendously impactful companies in India that are innovative, disruptive startups that actually deliver scale and impact to the country.
So are we thinking in that direction? Do you get a sense that our entrepreneurs are thinking in that direction?
I think a lot of companies are getting there, whether they start thinking of it that way, but eventually for a country like ours at the stage of economic development we are in, having any kind of scaled enterprise does lead to job creation, leads to market linkages, creates formalization. So I think impactful enterprises are getting created. And I'm happy to sort of give a couple of examples once my fellow panelists have spoken,
sure.
Where very, very successful unicorns, Sunicorn, you take a delivery, take an urban clap, they are not only commercially successful, but also highly impactful.
Okay.
Thanks for having me. I think there are two ways to build it in some sense. One is, I think, the work that's gone in the last 10, 15 years just created an incredible sort of inherent confidence in India to not necessarily come from traditional, business routes and those kind of financing methodologies, as opposed to piggyback on what the venture capital ecosystem is able to provide in terms of capital to entrepreneurs who were historically not seen as sort of fundable by the ecosystem, right? And banks and public markets are way beyond the reach of most of these entrepreneurs. So I think the ecosystem's ability to have more and more confidence in Indian entrepreneurs and have capital available at every point where it's needed, from $1 million angel round or a seed round all the way to a $100 million round. This is relatively new. So it's only in the last 4 or 5 years that you've seen that kind of influx. And so without capital, I don't think you can build the speed at which you need to see these unicorns. It's not like India hasn't built them profitably before. It's just that they take 20, 25 years. Now, what you're trying to do in the venture ecosystem is accelerate them to half that time. And so I think the capital ecosystem is getting more robust, and that's been a phenomenal advantage that current entrepreneurs get benefit from. The second, I think, is a lot of people on the panel, I think, are beneficiaries of Indian companies going global. So we saw that in IT services for about 2 decades. And then looks like nobody believed that it was possible with Indian tech in the shape of products, IP, analytics companies potentially becoming world beaters and building hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue and being valued at $1 billion or more. And now we are seeing poster children for that. We're seeing Freshworks, which recently got valued at $3.5 billion. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a lot of NASDAQ IPOs even before our IPOs. So I think we'll have, if we have to reach 100, I would predict that a good 30 will come from us tackling global markets, not just the Indian market. So then you're able to tap into global GDP and their ability to buy businesses, buy as customers and buy businesses eventually, as opposed to simply the Indian markets as customers or public markets. So that's my take.
Okay.
So, my view is that I think the last decade was about first India, right? So when the internet came to India, the early adopters of the internet were the elite. The richest people in India. They could afford devices. You had connectivity to the metro areas, and that was a population of about 15 to 20 million people. And out of that, we've got these 30 unicorns. But now, I would say the market is all about next India, which is about the next 150 million people, which in a decade will probably be about 300 million people, because of Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, deep penetration of 4G, across the country, smartphones becoming more affordable. So as you start building for this larger market, you will see, because it's a larger playing field, you'll see those 70 unicorns, those additional 70 emerge just because of the size of that market. So I think we are already there in terms of the landscape and the infrastructure having been set. I think to Karthik's point, now that the capital ecosystem is being built, I think we'll get there because the money supply will emerge. So I think it's a matter of time. The confluence of forces certainly seems to be in place.
Okay, Tej?
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for having all of us here. It's great to see, again, coming back to India today. I've been associated with them before. So I totally believe that we can build 70 more unicorns, and like all the panelists said, we have a lot of infra in place. If you see, I've been investing for 10 years in India, and Karthik and Anjali and Rehan has been doing even for longer. But the time taking to become a unicorn is shortening. Earlier, for example, we invested in Flipkart. It took them more than 10 years to, not to become a unicorn, but at least 5 years to get there. Now, if you look at Swiggy, they did that in 3 years. So also the internet penetration has improved. The infrastructure of capital has improved. Also, the government policies have worked out to be in favor of supporting startups. We need to see a lot more. One thing because our fund is from China, so what we have learned from China is that they support their startups even a lot more in terms of government subsidies, etc. And also having Karthik mentioned about companies cannot list in India because they're not profitable. So I think we could actually have a new exchange where a lot of these unprofitable companies can actually list and raise money. And Anjali does a lot of work with government, so she can probably put some light on it. So I do see there is a lot of things, a lot of new entrepreneurs are coming up. Earlier, taking entrepreneurship was considered as a very hard job. Now every IIT guy wants to, get into entrepreneurship. It's good that we have poster boys who have actually set examples for them. So
That's
I'm
true.
very, very, very excited actually.
That's true. But it's also true that in recent times, as more people have taken up entrepreneurship, they have become frustrated. And a lot of them have also shut down or moved shop or just explored other countries. You look at the numbers, we're looking at 234 unicorns in China, and you have 30 in India. We keep talking about ease of doing business and how India has gone up the rankings. But how has it really become easier for companies, for startups to set up and start out? The government you have a Startup India program, you have a whole host of schemes, there are funds, so on and so forth. There's a lot on paper, but what are the fundamental challenges that startups are really, that are holding back startups and that are holding back people from venturing out on their own? Anjali, since you work with the government.
Also, yes.
Yes.
I think very little actually holds back the youth of today to go into startups. So there is such a tremendous wave of entrepreneurship sweeping the country. And entrepreneurship, by the way, is not new to India. It's not a tech creation. India is a nation of entrepreneurs. Our growth has tended to be bottom up. Your chai wala, dukan wala, dhobi, istri wala, they're all actually micro-entrepreneurs in some ways. We have seen 20 years now of very successful microfinance, which has created micro-entrepreneurs in women, in poor women, and it is mainstream enough now where microfinance institutions are turning into small finance banks. So in that sense, entrepreneurship is not new. I think Karthik made a point earlier that the speed to market or speed to scale is actually accelerating. And that's the role that capital as well as our regulatory ecosystem plays. Capital is no longer an issue. I think there's a reasonable amount of both global and domestic capital that is now available in India. And certainly in the last few years, I think all of us in the ecosystem have seen the government take some very positive steps. There's a fund for startups that's been set up, administered by SIDBI, the Startup India program, deep engagement with investors as well as entrepreneurs in very forward-looking regulation. But the nature of regulation and government is it will lag and not lead what is happening in terms of innovation and entrepreneurship. So I stay optimistic. Yes, India is getting better in doing business, ease of doing business rankings. Yes, it is still difficult. Our infrastructure is not all there. But at the same time, we now have the largest global digital data network. We have the most robust payment stack, the NPCI stack, which is actually not government owned. It is available. There is deep engagement, whether it's Niti Aayog or it's DPIIT, with actually all of us. All of us have had the opportunity to serve on committees, speak with government, and certainly bring, and even more than us, we are after all capital intermediaries, we are supporters. It's the entrepreneurs themselves who are talking directly to government also.
So the point is the government listening? Yes, I know that there are conversations happening. Is the government listening, and are they responding to the challenges with the speed that you'd like them to respond?
So again, if you look at 2010, when sort of most of us sort of got actively involved in the venture ecosystem, to now, it's like chalk and cheese. It's like night and day. I think there were multiple points have been raised, right? So one is, I think, government-enabled infrastructure was quietly being built over a decade, right? And we owe a lot to that. Of course, then someone like Mukesh Bhai comes and layers a geo on top of that, suddenly erupts. The entire ecosystem suddenly has affordable, connectivity on infrastructure that the government has been enabling. That's part of the good they've done. To your point, I think they need to do a lot more in terms of, I think it's the trust deficit which is in India carries through in every interaction amongst Indians, right? And one is the lack of trust that the government has in its own entrepreneurs and its people, right? So you can't police before the disruption. The disruption, as your topic goes today, the disruption will die if you police disruption, right? And so the approach, like a professor once, I heard a professor say it, on how electric vehicles, for example, are or new technologies are adopted in the United States. And in a very simplistic manner, how he explained it was, the greatness of the United States is, if it's not written anywhere, it is permissible.
Sure. Yeah.
In India, it's exactly the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do something which is not written somewhere or codified in some law, everybody jumps over the other to try and codify it into law the next day, and messes it up because there is no such law. And they're trying to design laws around things which didn't exist. Right? And that goes into, Rehan as a shareholder in Ola will crib, like the amount of times Ola has been shut down or blockaded somewhere. So I think they've taken huge steps in terms of being collaborative, in involving us in policy. But still, I think that old 50-year, 60-year legacy of not wanting to lose control or not wanting to lose trust basically means that everything is seen with, as if somehow these new entrepreneurs or new business models are going to destroy the country, which is not the opening premise.
I do see a clash. There is one thing that they are trying to do, but then there are certain statements that are made on and off. Like very recently, there was a top minister who was quoted scolding Amazon and the like, saying that you cannot be offering such discounts and hurting the other retailers. Rehan, let me bring you in here. You're also with Ola. So, when over-policing happens and when there is a gap between what you're saying and the real actions, how they are playing out, what does it do to an entrepreneur who's trying to set up? And what does it mean for you as somebody who's supporting these businesses when you look at a business and when you see the regulatory challenges that that particular business may encounter? You obviously take that into account and decide that whether you want to support it or not support it, on what your future strategy is going to be with that business.
See, my view is that I don't think regulatory challenges define an opportunity, right? I think the greatest thing which has happened in this country in the last, couple of decades is that we've had this constantly rising GDP, and as a result, we've had more and more people with disposable income, in the country, right? Which alludes to the creation of demand, right? And this has positively impacted almost all sectors, right? And I think, and that has been the bedrock on which all the companies are now being created. Now, along with this, you've had enabling technologies which have come and have provided access. There are payment systems now like Paytm, Bheem, UPI, etc. So I think these are the most important building blocks which have created demand. I mean, you could have the friendliest, I mean, you take a country like Singapore, it has the friendliest regulation, but it doesn't have a market, right? So startup activity in that country for that country is minuscule, right, as a result. Because we have a lot of demand, our startup activity in India is intense, right? Now, will there be regulatory challenges? Of course there will be regulatory challenges over here. This is a very large nation. This is a federation of multiple states, and within that there are multiple municipalities, right? And all of them have their own view, right? And so you're going to crawl along. If you go to Singapore, you know, all the ministers are each other's cousins, and they just speak to each other and say, okay, let's get this regulation fixed. That's a small country, right? In a 1.3 billion nation, you're going to have a very different approach. So I think these challenges will occur. We've seen them in Ola, we've seen them in PharmEasy, which is another company I was a part of. We've seen them in multiple companies that I've been a part of, because technology companies will always push the envelope on regulation, right? But I don't think that is what defines startup activity in the nation. I think this is a democracy. There will be a continuous dialogue between you know, all stakeholders and the government. And I think everyone over here can allude to the fact that the government does listen. They do try to put in things, but it's a big machinery, right? You go and speak to some of the IS officers in Delhi, they have to call up their counterparts in the states. Those guys have to have a buy-in. It takes time, right? But I think the great news is that we have demand, we're continuing that march, and that is wonderful for the startup ecosystem.
Right. Tej, you know, the time duration for a company to become a unicorn is shortened considerably, a point that you alluded to. Why is that? Like a Swiggy became a unicorn in 2 to 3 years, a Flipkart took like almost a decade. What's changed? Why is it that, how are these companies becoming so big so quickly? And is it sustainable?
Yeah, so I think a lot of points were covered, but the Mukesh Bhai's Jio movement was one of the major disruptions because it enabled the internet accessibility to the bottom of pyramid, what Rehan also mentioned, you know, the next billion users may be coming online, right? And second is the availability of cheap phones. Now you could buy, you know, and a lot of it goes to, you know, these Chinese, you know, Vivo, Oppo and Xiaomi, and then obviously we had Micromax and other players from India. So combination of both two and accessibility of data at a, you know, almost, we are the lowest, by the way, in the world in terms of what we charge. Obviously the telecom companies are getting hurt because of it. But that enabled so much more usage of data. On top of it, you know, a lot of international large investors look at, you know, 3 big geographies like what Rehan was saying. You know, it's China, US and India. And India offers, you know, 1.3 billion people. So all the large mega buck sort of private equity investors or sovereign wealth funds are looking at India very carefully, because they are looking at India and saying this is the next China, and this is where we would like to invest. So also a lot of my Chinese colleagues say this is great time for India to actually take advantage, because China and US are going through a trade war. We have a clear runway. I just worry, are we doing enough to really exploit that? I'll just give one more example in China, coming back to how they manage. Every state has competition. Every state want to lure startups. They want to bring them to their, you know, and if you look at India, there is only Bangalore, Delhi and Bombay, you know. So I think more state needs to focus and create the ecosystem so more companies can come out of that, which is still lacking, and the government needs to create competition within the state governments, because that's where you will, you know, increase jobs, bring in more dollars, you know, that's what need to happen.
Anjali, how do VCs sniff an opportunity, or a unicorn opportunity? You know, what are the things that you look at when you're funding a business? And can you tell that, okay, this company has potential? And how do you, of course you can tell. How can you tell? You have to give out the trade secret. In fact, all of you have to.
For us, it's, we like to see businesses that have large scaling possibility. So is it solving a large problem for India? Now, this is an India-centric business. Of course, when you look at enterprise SaaS, it is equally clear that India will offer a somewhat limited revenue pool and even a smaller profit and margin pool. So if it's enterprise SaaS type play, then what is their ability to go global? If it's an India-oriented play, then is this a scalable business? What is the nature of problem they're solving? So that's one. Two is, what is the ability of the entrepreneur, the founder team? And there is a little bit of it is judgment, so I don't really quite know what the secret sauce is. I would love to know. But you take a judgment call. Can this person execute? Do they have enough passion? Will they stay committed? Typically, we like to see more than one founder, but I don't think there is any science to it. There are plenty of very, very successful companies where there has been only one founder. You know, take Ola, for example. And there are others where there have been co-founders. And then finally, it's really a question of, can we as an investor really help them scale faster? So those are the kinds of things we look at.
I don't think you'll get a different answer from most of us. So we'll just nuance, I think, our personal notes on top of what Anjali said. So it's, if not 100%, 80% of the weightage is market opportunity size and quality of the founders. There's no difference.
So when you gauge the quality of the founders,
yeah.
what do you look at?
Yeah.
And also give me a sense of the kind of businesses that you've supported.
Yeah.
So that one gets an idea about.
Yeah,
Sure.
so I think the nuances to that, which I was going to get to, is that it's very difficult to, if we were that good from a secret sauce perspective, then out of all 25, we would have figured out how to get, leave alone 25, even 5 is a stretch, right? If you pick 25 companies in a cycle, and forget about India, I don't think the Americans or the Chinese have figured this out yet. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to understand startups as a probability game. Right? It's all a summation of various things falling in place, including luck, which is why a lot of entrepreneurs will say there was a large amount of luck. So it's luck, timing, all of those also play a very significant role as the company grows, number one. So when you're picking them, you're not hoping that, unfortunately we're not seeing the Janampatris, right? So we're basically saying that this person may or may not get lucky, but what are the core ingredients that you're backing? And when it comes to that individual or individuals, essentially saying, are they passionate enough about solving the problem? So there are a lot of kids who will come and give you, hey, this is such a cool idea that I've come up with, or a cool solution that you've come up with. Invariably, every person we have funded, the idea looks different after a year.
So then maybe it evolves, maybe.
It evolves. So
Yeah.
basically what they're chasing as this large market opportunity becomes very important. So if he's solving mobility, Bhavish Agarwal is solving mobility, or the Bansals are solving how commerce or retail will be done in India, that's the scale of the problem you're imagining. The underlying elements are very, very difficult to figure out. And a lot of founders, I think, struggle to know what the limits of their own scalability are. And it's not easy, unlike in old world corporate India, where you can go and hire great talent who's put in 20 years. Here, you have to grow into becoming the superstar CEO. Right? There are very, very few companies with sub-$100 million valuations which can go and hire great talent to substitute who was the founder or the owner. You're it all the way till you take it to unicorn, right?
Sure.
And so we all acknowledge that our business is eventually what we call a gut business. And it's not gut on a daily basis, but training it over a decade or two. And so you get better and better in being able to sense this as that person, man, woman, team, whoever comes in, you're able to judge that. I think I won't be wrong if I say that in the first 15 minutes, you know whether this is worth pursuing to a yes.
First 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's
The
very crucial.
no's are known in the first 15 minutes, I think.
Wow.
Right?
Rehan?
And then you double down, triple down on checking your gut
Okay.
over multiple meetings. Over 3, 4, 5 meetings, bring other people to validate your gut over 4, 5, 6 meetings to say, I still want to back this
So
person.
how democratic is this process? Is it
At early stage, I'm an advocate of actually non-consensus.
non-consensus?
Yeah, at early stage.
Okay.
But you do all these sanity checks about, do you sense anything negative about this person? Do you think there's something off which I didn't catch in my meeting? We do independent one-on-ones. So that's what it goes back to validating, right? But if you're trying to get everybody to buy into the same entrepreneur with the same passion the way you or your colleague did, I think it fails a lot of the time.
Rehan? I also, to adding to that, I also want to know whether Indian VCs have become more patient now with the businesses they are funding, or are they still howling like helicopter VCs you know, making sure that the business grows at the rate that it was promised, that, you know, so are you also becoming more patient and letting the business do what it's supposed to do before bringing back the returns?
Well,
Be honest.
So, I'll tell you how I think this happens, and I think maybe my panelists may concur with this. See, what happens is that you try to build a portfolio of companies, right? That is why I always, you know, I get a lot of people that approach me and say, hey, should I become an angel investor? I said, yes, by all means, but don't do it if you're not prepared to make at least 20 investments with that pool of money that you have allocated, right? So what happens then is that you make these 20 investments, right? And you do your best with all of them. You use all these factors that Anjali and Karthik and they've mentioned, you know, large markets, great people, you know, strong gut instinct towards them, good team, and so on and so forth, right? But the reality is that very few of those 20 from your portfolio, or let's say your portfolio is 30, whatever X amount of your portfolio are going to work out. Now, do you sit and you whip the other 18? No, certainly not. I don't think anybody does that. I think we as a VC firm or the investor go in knowing that a very small percentage of these companies are going to work. So I think one of the elements of success, and I think you're trying to ask, what are the elements of success over here? I think one of the elements of success is to have this large portfolio, right, in there. You don't just kind of have these, you know, 3 bets and then it's going to work. If I got Ola, you know, I also got a lot of misses along with it, right? If I got Dhruva, I also got a lot of other misses along with it, and so on and so forth, right? And I think everybody has possibly the same story. So I'll give you an interesting number. In 2018, we looked at 4,183 companies, PowerPoints. We met over 1,000 of them to invest in 7.
Wow, 2,483 companies.
4,183 companies. We met 1,000 to invest in 7.
That's challenging. Tej, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think everybody has shared their opinion. I'll just say 2 things. I think we all in some way play a baseball game. We have more misses than hits, and regrets as well, because there were some great companies which came to me which I passed because I thought, oh, this is never going to make it, but then it was proven entirely wrong. And also I think this is one job we have which is very secure, because as we age, we become better. Like Karthik was mentioning, because we have better judgment. But one thing I would say now, it is even more difficult as being a VC than it was, you know, 7 years ago or 10 years ago, because at that time there was a clear difference when we invested in Flipkart between the founders and where they were in their stage versus now, because now you see founders, a lot of them are talented founders, so your judgment becomes even harder. But yeah, we do, you know, evaluate the process like all of us mentioned, and we are always chasing the good ones, and also new sectors, I would say, you know, like venturing into EV will be great now, because that's something which is coming up, or shared mobility, etc. So you have to watch out as a VC what's going to happen than what already has happened, because you don't want to invest in what has already happened. So if you want to start a, you know, new company, think about things which are going to happen and not which have already happened.
Okay. Very quickly, is there a typical founder profile that you look at? Like if a founder is from an IIT, he or she is more likely to get you to take a bet on their idea.
So actually, when you asked that question, I've been reflecting on some of the most successful founders I'm privileged to be associated with, and they're all so different. So there's delivery. There's one set of founders. They are the IIT IIM. There's Nika, and you know, Falguni is amazing, but she's not your typical founder at all. Built a very successful business. Urban Clap is different. Lone Tap are actually all ex-bankers. If I look at folks who have been ex-consultants, ex-bankers, they are also successful. People who have operated businesses, they are also successful. So I don't think there is a typical sort of founder profile. I think what the thread that runs through is tremendous learning agility. So if I were to pick one thing that I look for, it's how hungry are they to grow personally. Because if the entrepreneur does not scale and learn and grow swiftly and move from being an entrepreneur and a single founder, take their idea to a business and then a business to an institution, you will not get to be a unicorn. So I look for learning agility and a lot of humility around that learning agility.
Karthik, how many women founders have you placed your bets on?
We're not too bad.
Because
I think we might be better than the industry average. So
Okay,
we
that would be?
probably have a women co-founder in, I would say about 12 to 15% of our companies. Yeah, it's not like...
And that's better than
it's better than the industry average. For sure. Yeah,
Yeah, diversity is pathetic in the startup universe. It's a fact.
It's tough because, and Anjali, of course, will speak to it. Women are just expected to take on so much more of a load in society, apart from being at the startup gig itself, that a lot of them, and it's a 10, 15-year journey. It's not a small, short journey, right? So we find them predominantly in co-founding teams. So I've never seen, I don't think I've funded a single founder woman. And they've come either as two women or a woman and a guy. And it's because I think they bring incredible sort of balance to the team, but it's a lot of hard work to build businesses in India. And we've seen that we've not seen the selection set to be, if you look at the numbers who apply, it's probably even worse. If you look at the 4,000 he's talking about, we probably look at 3,000. I don't think more than 5% would have, or 6% would have. I'll give you numbers next year. We're tabulating them better this year. But I don't think it's better than that.
Rehan, how many women founders have you funded?
Well, I haven't counted how many we funded, but we have one company, Fab Alley, which is these two girls. It's entirely their own business.
One company. And how many companies
No, I mean one very successful company.
Okay.
So it's doing over 100 crores in turnover. It's one of our star companies. So I haven't counted. I mean, there are a bunch of them which have had women co-founders, but this is, and we funded one company which didn't succeed, which had a sole founder. But like Karthik said, there are quite a few with co-founders in there. But this is the one very successful one I could think of, which is all-girl team.
Tej?
I'm sorry to say none, but I think the problem exists in the funnel. We need more women founders to actually come into the ecosystem. There are few funds I know who are focusing on that and making an effort. But we would love to see more women founders and we'll definitely love to fund them.
Anjali is laughing. She's giving that very all-knowing smile.
I'm sorry,
Anjali.
I would roll my eyes if I could, but I think we heard this 20 years ago in corporate, that there aren't enough women, 10 years ago in boards that there aren't enough women, and actually, as it turns out, there are. So it's a matter of in investing, your first religion is to return capital to your investors and maximize returns. So nothing takes away from that. And I do agree the funnel is somewhat slim when it comes to having women founders, but they are out there. And I think there is some thought these days of funds that are focused on women founders. One wonders if that's actually healthy or it makes things worse. I'm an LP in a US fund that is probably one of the most successful seed stage funds, and they only invest in women founders. It's called the Female Founders Fund.
Wow.
But here in India, we actually have 2 women-founded companies in our portfolio and probably another one coming up soon. So they are out there. And I actually don't think anyone discriminates against, so that I will say for all my fellow panelists here. I think just being able to raise the gender question itself is a good, positive, healthy
Yes,
thing.
so hopefully you'll go back with that thought today.
Yeah.
Maybe the next big Flipkart would come from a woman founder if you were to give them a chance.
We have 12, 15 of them. I think there's a very healthy number. It's just, I think
Not specifically you, I'm talking
everything
about...
Everything in the cycle, like how Anjali has herself been a role model. I think everything in an ecosystem is around role models. And today, Falguni at Nykaa and others are becoming those role models. It's important for them to speak out. In fact, there's unfortunately a larger burden on the role models to be able to speak out in any ecosystem.
All right.
I'm hoping that it'll start seeing a lot more volumes.
I just want to make one point. In China, there are actually a lot more women, not only founders, but also investors. Yeah. So in our partnership, there are 3 women partners, and they're very strong. So I think it's also, we need to push more women come out and work.
Tej, hopefully next year we'll have you and you will not say none in your list of businesses that you've invested. Thank you very much.